Okay, guys, so to make things a little easier for you, in case you missed notes or you're absent, I decided to try this podcast thing out, so we'll see how it goes. This is Chapter 6 of South Carolina History, and it's titled A Rich and Royal Colony. And so let's get started. Okay, guys, this is Section 1, Growing as a Royal Colony. Our essential question for this section is, how did changes in government affect South Carolina? If you'll remember from Chapter 5, we had transitioned from a proprietary colony to a royal colony, which means that the proprietors lost control and the king and parliament took control of the colony. So this chapter is going to focus primarily on how those changes affected how the colony is governed and how the people in the colony live under that particular government. The terms that you need to know for Section 1 are as follows: the Township Plan, Scots Irish, Pennsylvania Dutch, and Great Wagon Road. Now, as we go through the notes, I want you to write in the definition of each of these terms in your own words in the space provided. All right, after the proprietors lose control of the colony and the royal government takes over, they're going to take much more of a hands-off approach to managing the colony. They're 3,000 miles away, so they can't really deal in local affairs for all 13 colonies. So they're going to leave a lot of the decisions to the colonists themselves. And as a result, the Commons House of the General Assembly is going to grow in power. They'll be responsible for making decisions such as appointing local officials, collecting taxes. But the biggest thing to remember out of this is that it maintains and even strengthens the control of these wealthy planters in the Low Country. You will have, in order to hold office, you will have to have at least 500 acres of land and own at least 10 slaves. And obviously, in this time period, in order to have that, you have to be a very wealthy person. So this makes sure that it will be the wealthy elite that are essentially calling the shots for the colony for years to come. So we start out with a lot of diversity taking place in South Carolina during its first 60 years. As far as the white population is concerned, you have a lot of folks that are migrating into the area from England, the West Indies, Ireland, Scotland, France, Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands. And then from the west coast of Africa, you have just as much diversity, and they come from many different tribes that speak different languages and have various cultural characteristics. Both groups bring their distinct languages, accents, cultural habits, food preferences, artistic tastes, and especially work skills to South Carolina. In South Carolina, the colony's white population had grown from 3,800 in 1700 to 9,800 in 1730, while the black population had increased from 2,800 to 21,600. All these numbers are approximate, but they show trends that worried the white leadership in Charlestown. They are desperate to find a way to increase the proportion of whites in the population and make the slave owners safer. They're terrified of a slave uprising. So Governor Robert Johnson suggests a plan in 1731 to bring in more white settlers to balance the growing slave population and to provide a bit of a barrier or a buffer on the frontier against any kind of Spanish, French, or Indian attack on Charlestown. The township plan set aside several 6 square mile tracts of land on the frontier beyond where any whites had already settled. You got to remember that any area 50 miles outside of Charlestown was considered the backcountry. So the leaders offered Europeans financial assistance and free land to come to South Carolina. Now you have to remember this land that they are offering is not the best land in the colony. If you'll look back and think back to our geographic lessons at the beginning of the year, You'll remember that the land in the Piedmont and particularly in the Sandhills was not very suitable for farming. They will be able to grow enough crops to feed their families, but definitely they will not be able to start plantations and grow cash crops like their neighbors in the Low Country who are extremely wealthy compared to those that are bringing in. The township plan attracted 10 to 15,000 foreign settlers to the upcountry. Most of these folks will be Scots-Irish. Okay, so we also get a new neighbor in the colony of Georgia. King George II had granted the land to a James Oglethorpe, who was a military officer and member of the English Parliament. Oglethorpe wanted to use Georgia as a base of operations against the Spanish in St. Augustine. But also he had an idea for a utopian society where no one would cuss, no one would drink, no one would have any more land than 500 acres. He was basically a modern day socialist, I guess is the best way to put it. But it never works out. When the settlers begin to come into Savannah, they see how things work in Charlestown, and they want to do the same thing in Georgia. So very quickly his ideal utopian society falls apart. Okay, so in the 1750s and 1760s, we're also going to have more migration into the backcountry of South Carolina. In addition to more Scots-Irish, you're going to see a second group of Germans, which are known as the Pennsylvania Dutch. These folks, along with the Scots-Irish, are going to come primarily from the colonies of Pennsylvania and Virginia. They'll travel down the Great Wagon Road in Conestoga wagons, and I've attached a video here that will help you to better understand exactly what that journey entailed. Okay, so by the end of the colonial era, or around 1775, we start to see some very real differences between the folks living in the Low Country and the folks living in the Up Country. There's nearly 180,000 people living in South Carolina, split equally between the Up Country and Low Country, but 80% of the total white population of South Carolina is living in the Up Country. And these differences are not just economic differences. Obviously, people living in the backcountry are living in lower income, whereas people in the Low Country, they're comprised primarily of planters and are extremely wealthy. But there's also other differences, such as religion. In the Low Country, the Anglican Church was dominant, whereas in the backcountry, you have several different denominations, such as Presbyterians, Lutherans, Quakers, and Baptists, which most of us are members of that denomination. And so near the coast, many white families owned slaves in large plantations, while in the upcountry, there were hardly any slaves at all. If there were slaves, there might be one per farm, and that slave was really a part of the family. They lived in the house with the family, and the farmer would work alongside with the slave. So we start to see some major differences there. Also in government, remember that you had to own 500 acres of land and 10 slaves in order to serve or be elected to the Commons House. Well, obviously nobody in the backcountry or upcountry of South Carolina is going to be able to afford that. So there is a huge amount of inequality as far as power within the colony. Clearly, the planter elite living in the Low Country have control of the colony and then the state once the American Revolution begins. And a lot of folks in the backcountry really resent this.